to Crime and Court. My name is Heather, and this is another episode of my Innocence Lost series. This is a series where I do a story each week on someone who was wrongfully convicted. I typically, in past episodes, I often go with the Innocence Project as one of my sources as we go through many of the stories of the exonerees that have been able to be helped through DNA, through, new advances, whatever might be new evidence in their trials, new trials, however they get exonerated, often with DNA. This week, I decided to do something a little bit different. It's the legendary story that inspired The Fugitive. So we will get into it. This is with about Dr. Sam Sheppard, who was the suspect of his wife's homicide. And he was convicted. It's a long story. And instead of me trying to wrap it or try to summarize it, I'll just r- give you the whole story. So, this is the story of Dr. Sam Sheppard. He is the case that inspired the movie, Harrison Ford movie, The Fugitive. Originally it was on a TV show, which they'll talk about later in the article here. So I'm going off of the UMKC School of Law by Professor Douglas O. Linder. This is a very well organized website. It has court documents, transcripts, all sorts of related things to this case. So I'm going to use it as our source today. So before I get started, please hit that like button because it helps push out the video to more people and it also helps YouTube know videos that you like. All right, so Dr. Sam Sheppard, the trials on account. And this is another reason why I wanted to do this. It is coming up on the 70th anniversary of this crime. So there's still question as to whether Sam did or didn't do it. So that's also something that's different about this case because I usually only do stories of people who, they've already been exonerated or we know for a fact that, they should be exonerated, but they're sitting in prison still for some reason. So we are I'm playing it like, okay, did he or didn't he? So let's begin. So on July 4th, 1954, Marilyn Sheppard, the wife of a handsome 30-year-old Dr. Sam Sheppard, was brutally unalived. I don't like to use that word. I mean, it's fine, whatever, it just sounds stupid. Um, I do, I usually try to throw in other ways of saying it without saying, like, taking their life or, I try not to say the M word because YouTube doesn't like that. And yeah, I don't like to say unalive. So, anyways, in this case, I'm saying it because it fits the sentence. Let's begin over again. On July 4th, 1954, Marilyn Sheppard, the wife of a handsome 30-year-old Dr. Sam Sheppard, was brutally emmed in the bedroom of their home in Bay Village, Ohio, on the shore of Lake Erie. Sam Sheppard denied any involvement in the homicide and described his own battle with the person who took his wife's life that he described as bushy haired. So, according to Sam's description, he got into his own uh, physical altercation with this man who had bushy hair. So, did Sam do it? It's rare for a homicide mystery to endure for over half a century, 70 years now, coming up on whatever day the 4th is. I think it's Wednesday, Tuesday. So did Sam do it? Um, Almost always, if the mystery is not fully resolved at the trial, subsequent admissions, previously uncovered clues, or more sophisticated forensic tests reveal what the trial did not. Not so with the Sam Sheppard case. Facing two different juries, 12 years apart, Sam Sheppard was found guilty by one jury, not guilty by the next. All right, so that's our intro. Sam and his wife Marilyn water skiing in happier times. Look at her cute little bathing suit. And you got her hair in the hairnet because you couldn't get your hair wet. All right, so even over the past decade, partisans continued the debate. A third jury in 2000 asked to consider awarding the Sheppard family damages for wrongful imprisonment, sided with county prosecutors. So, still, no clear cut answer. In 2001, a book on the Sheppard case concluded that Sam was clearly innocent. 2 years later, another book on the case argued just as forcefully that the first jury got it right. Sam was guilty as charged. I'm not gonna scroll any further because there is a photo. I don't know if I want to show it here because I don't want to get stricken from YouTube. All right, so you can't see anything though. So apart from the large unanswered question of guilt, the Sheppard case deserves to be considered among the nation's most famous because it produced a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision on fair trial rights, and it launched the career of a flamboyant young defense attorney named F. Lee Bailey. The case is also remarkable for the unlikely collection of notable figures that touched the case, including columnist and quiz show star Dorothy Kilgallen? I don't know who that is. Cleveland Browns quarterback and NFL Hall of Famer Otto Graham, and a chief propagandist Joseph Goebbels. The case was also widely associated with the popular early 60s TV show The Fugitive. So it was a TV show and then later turned into a movie um, with Harrison Ford. And it was a really great movie. What's his name? Tommy Lee Jones played the sheriff that was chasing him, and it was a good movie. All right, so I'm gonna pause for 1 second because I don't want to show a crime scene photo. So 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna scroll past it. I didn't want it to get caught on the camera. All right, so the evening of Saturday, July 3rd, had been a pleasant one at the home of Sam and Marilyn Sheppard. Friends from their neighborhood, Don and Nancy Ahern, and their two children joined the Sheppard family for drinks and a casual dinner. From a screened porch, the Sheppards and Aherns finished dinner and watched the sunset over Lake Erie. Don Aherns brought his two children back home, put them to bed, and drove back to the Sheppards. Okay. I guess you just left your kids alone back in those days. Interesting. All right, so after Marilyn tucked in their 7-year-old son Chip into his upstairs bedroom, the two couples sat down to watch the movie Strange Holiday on one of the two available television channels. Two channels. Marilyn sat on Sam's lap until Sam, having had a long and trying day in the emergency room at Bayview Hospital, moved to a daybed in the living room and fell asleep. Shortly after midnight, Marilyn showed the Aherns to the door. So midnight, the Aherns leave. Marilyn is probably gonna head to bed, and he and we know Sam is in the daybed in the living room where he fell asleep. Okay. So at 5:40 the next morning, Spencer Hoke, The mayor of Bay Village was roused by a phone call. On the line was his friend Sam Sheppard. My God, Spence, get over here quick, Sam explained. I think I have ended Marilyn. Hoke quickly dressed and with his wife Esther drove the short distance to the Sheppard home where they found the bare chested Sheppard in his den, leaning back in a swivel chair and holding his neck. That's odd. Asked what had happened, Sheppard offered a mumbled and, on the face of it, improbable account. Sheppard said that he was sleeping downstairs on the daybed when he heard Marilyn shout, Sam! According to his story, which he repeated later to police officers, Sheppard ran up to the dimly lit stairs to their bedroom where he saw a white form standing next to his wife's twin bed. Oh, God, they had twin beds back then. He grappled with the form, with whoever that was, but was hit on the back of the neck and lost consciousness. When he came to, he took Marilyn's pulse and determined her to be not alive anymore. After checking Chip's room next door and finding his son sleeping unharmed, Sheppard ran downstairs, where he saw the form again, this time running out the back door leading to the Lake Erie shore. Sam chased the form down the stairs toward the lake, again battled with the tall, bushy-haired form. Sam described what happened after he lunged or jumped and grasped the form on the beach. I felt myself twisting or choking, and this terminated my consciousness. That's a weird way to say it, isn't it? It terminated my consciousness. But I guess if you're like a doctor and you are used to talking like that, I guess. When he revived in the breaking dawn, wet and somehow now missing his t-shirt and watch, he went back into the house and called Mayor Hoke. Sheppard remained vague about many details. He didn't know how many intruders were in the bedroom when he first was injured, and he couldn't even be certain of um, the gender. Okay. He couldn't even be certain of the gender of the fighting form, calling the intruder a biped in the interview. That's weird. He attributed his inability to be more specific to the effects of having been knocked out. That and being in a stressful situation, you might not or remember things clearly. At 6, Bay Village police officer Fred Drank Drankon Drunken? I don't know. Fred D. arrived at the Sheppard home. He found Marilyn's body lying face up in her bed, with her face turned toward the door. Her pajama top was pulled up and her chest was bare. Her pajama bottom had been removed from one leg, leaving her area exposed. Her legs had been pulled beneath the wooden bar and the foot of her bed. Beneath the wooden bar and the foot of her bed. Marilyn's face was all but unrecognizable. Over 20 curved gashes cut deeply into her face and scalp. BLOOD outlined her body, staining the cover and pillow. On the walls and closet doors were dozens of spots of BLOOD. That's another word YouTube doesn't like. An autopsy would later determine her time of uh, loss of life at about 4:30 a.m. The autopsy also showed Marilyn to have been pregnant with a 4-month-old male fetus. That's sad. So 4:30 a.m., the autopsy says. Investigating the rest of the home, Drunken found evidence of either a robbery or a staged robbery. Sheppard's black medical bag stood on end in the hallway, its contents spilled out on the wooden hallway floor. In the den, a high school track trophy of Sam's and a bowling trophy of Marilyn's lay scratched and broken on the floor. Drankin discovered the drawers of Sheppard's desk opened, but all all in an oddly even way, and nothing appeared to be missing. While police continued their investigation of the Sheppard home, the best NFL quarterback of his time, Otto Graham of the Cleveland Browns, decided to stop by and see what all the ruckus was about at his neighbor's house. That's cool. The your NFL quarterback neighbor just comes on over, see what's going on. Otto's wife, Beverly, was a good friend of Marilyn's. While Otto sweated away in training camp, Sam Sheppard would take Marilyn and Beverly water skiing in Lake Erie. We just saw a picture of them water skiing. Even though the crime scene had not yet been secured, officers allowed Graham to inspect the Sheppard's bedroom. The Saturday Evening Post quoted Graham on what he thought as he viewed the spattered room. "Oh my God, it looks like someone stood in the middle of the room with a great big can of red paint and a brush and flicked it all around. This wasn't a couple of blows. Oh no, whoever did it, they had to be out of their mind." That paints a picture in your imagination. Cuyahoga, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Cuyahoga County Coroner Sam Gerber and an investigator arrived at the Sheppard home shortly before 8. As Gerber listened to Officer Drenken's report of his preliminary investigation of the crime scene, his suspicions of Sam Sheppard rose. Sheppard's account of events made little sense. The neatly pulled out desk drawers were not what he'd expect from a robbery. There did not appear to have been a forced entry. Gerber conducted his own investigation on the assumption that the crime was a domestic homicide. As a result, he devoted less effort to recovering fingerprint and evidence than might have been expected in a neutral investigation. So his bias or his prejudices are clouding the way that he investigates the scene. Completing his preliminary work at the Sheppard home, Gerber was driven to Bayview Hospital so that he might interview one of its newest patients, Dr. Sam Sheppard. Gerber interviewed Sheppard for just 10 minutes. He gathered Sam's clothes, including his waterlogged shoes, belt, boxer shorts, and pants. On the trousers, he spotted a large stain on the left knee, suggesting that he had knelt in some BLOOD. Later that day, back in the Sheppard home, Gerber was overheard telling a detective it's obvious that the doctor did it. Gerber ordered 2 young detectives to visit Sheppard in his hospital room in the hope of gaining a full confession. The detectives did not achieve their mission. Sam stuck to his improbable story. When Detective Robert Schottky directly accused Sheppard, "I don't know about my partner, but I think you ended your wife." Sheppard insisted, "I loved Marilyn." Before the long day was over, Sheppard would have 2 more notable guests see him in his hospital room: future Hall of Famer Graham and Cleveland's most famous criminal defense attorney, Bill Corrigan. And that's a picture of Sheppard with Bill, oh, no, Coroner Gerber. That's Coroner Gerber. All right. So the Sheppard homicide quickly became an obsession of Cleveland newspapers. The morning after Marilyn Sheppard's life was lost, a large picture of her ran below the Cleveland's Press banner headline, "Doctor's Wife and Life's Ended in Bay Village." Doctor's wife's life ended in Bay Village. Below the photo of Marilyn was a picture of Sam in his hospital bed with an orthopedic brace around his neck. The accompanying story was sympathetic to Sam and suggested that drug thieves were suspected in the bludgeoning. Before long, however, as facts and rumors emerged and mixed, the press would turn increasingly hostile toward Sam Sheppard. No one played a larger and more critical role in the intensifying attacks on Sheppard than the influential called by many Mr. Cleveland, editor of the Cleveland Press, Louis B. Seltzer. On July 8th, the paper accused the Sheppard family of trying to thwart the investigation, quoting Assistant Prosecutor John Mahan. In my 23 years of criminal prosecution, I have never seen such flagrant stalling as in this case by the family of Dr. Samuel Sheppard. The next day, the press reported on page 1, Dr. Samuel H. Sheppard declined to submit to a lie detector test for questioning about the slaying of his attractive wife. Really? They had to throw in attractive. The same day, an editorial in the paper criticized the pace of the investigation. The principal problem is the fact that, for whatever reasons, the investigative authorities were slow in getting started, fumbling when they did, awkward in breaking through the protective barriers of the family, and far less aggressive than they should have been in following out clues, tracks, and evidence. Why is it spelled like that? That would be weird. Okay. So by July 21st, the press made a full-throated cry for Coroner Gerber to publicly question Sheppard with a front-page editorial headlined, "Why no inquest? Do it now, Mr. Gerber." So the public was calling for, well, not really the public, but the press, I guess, was calling for an inquest of um, Sheppard to see if he had something to do with it. They didn't think that he was looked into enough, I guess. In the days following the homicide, investigators focused on the search for a possible motive. A neighbor's report that Marilyn has told her that Sam was sterile from too much time near X-ray equipment led police to speculate that the homicide might have been retaliation for Marilyn becoming pregnant with another man's child. Tests of the fetus, however, dispelled that theory, so it was Sam's baby. Before long, Sam's appetite for extramarital affairs soon emerged as a favored theory for why a successful doctor might want to end his attractive and pregnant wife's life. Bay Village Police Chief John Easton learned from Nancy Ahern that Sam was seeing a nurse from Bayview Hospital and had showered her with gifts. Of course, seeing a nurse, doctor seeing a nurse. The subject of extramarital affairs came up on July 10th at Sheriff's headquarters, where Sam Sheppard voluntarily appeared for questioning about the homicide. Police had learned the name of the possible partner, a lab technician living in California named Susan Hayes. Asked, "Did you ever have an affair with a Sue Hayes?" Sam replied that they had been nothing more than good friends. In fact, Sam Sheppard and Susan Hayes had been a good deal more than close friends. Shortly after they first met in 1951, when Hayes performed lab work for Sheppard's emergency calls, their relationship turned physical with torrid encounters either in Sheppard's car or the intern's apartment. Later, when Susan Hayes confirmed that their relationship was indeed physical, the public saw Sheppard as a liar with a motive to end his wife's life. This is interesting, right? I mean, this makes for a good story. Even if it wasn't real life, it would make for a good homicide mystery. The very day that the Cleveland Press editorialized for Sam Gerber to hold an inquest, the coroner responded by scheduling an inquest to begin the next day in a Bay Village school gymnasium. The gym was packed for the afternoon session of July 22nd when Sam Sheppard, still wearing his neck brace, sat at a table and answered Gerber's questions. Sheppard's attorney, Bill Corrigan, was forced by Gerber to watch the proceedings from the stands. Sam's account of events struck many observers as unnaturally detached and cool. Asked, for example, whether he ran or walked to catch the form he followed down to the beach, Sam replies, I can't give you a specific recollection. I proceeded as rapidly as I could. All right. That sounds, sorry, just gonna adjust here. Sounds believable or not. Usually people on the stand that say the words I don't recall or I can't remember quite a bit are the ones that you don't trust. Ah, okay. Called back for further questioning the next morning, Sheppard faced questions concerning his relationship to Sue Hayes. Sticking with his attorney's advice to deny any physical relationships or relations on the theory that the questions were irrelevant and likely to be ruled inadmissible in a criminal trial. Sheppard answered absolutely not when asked by Gerber, did you and Sue Hayes at any time sleep in the same bed? The crowd seemed to cheer on Gerber as he pressed Sheppard with more specific questions concerning a particular four-night stay at a private home in Southern California a few months before the homicide. Hmm. When Bill Corrigan, watching the spectacle from his perch in the stands, shouted at a private court reporter he had hired to report audience hooting and hollering in the transcript he was preparing, Gerber ordered the defense attorney forcibly removed from the gymnasium. The most the mostly female crowd of spectators cheered wildly. This is a picture of Susan Hayes as she leaves the grand jury room. While the inquest, so that gives you a little info about what she's going to have to do, testify in a grand jury about this guy and her relationship with him. So this is why you just don't have an affair. Just don't. I mean, you shouldn't because you should out of respect for the person that you're with, but also, if that person that you're with ends up not alive anymore, who do you think they're going to suspect? Obviously, they're going to suspect you, the cheater. All right, so while the inquest satisfied one demand of Louis Seltzer's paper, the colorful editor soon had another one. A week after the show in Bay Village's school gymnasium, the Cleveland Press ran an editorial headline, Quit Stalling, Bring Him In. The page one editorial argued that Sheppard should be brought to police headquarters for a grilling. Everybody's agreed that Sam Sheppard is the most unusual homicide suspect ever seen around these parts, except for some superficial questioning during Coroner Sam Gerber's inquest. He has been scot-free of any official grilling into the circumstances of his wife's homicide. On cue, police arrested Sheppard that evening at 10:30 at the home of his parents. Over the next 2 days, two teams of detectives grilled Sheppard for 22 hours. 22 hours of investigation or interrogation. That would suck. Still, however, they were unable to extract a confession. Sheppard stuck to his story. Well, when you're innocent and you don't do it, you can easily stick to a story. Stick to the rights, stick to the truth. On August 16, a grand jury met to consider evidence against Sheppard. They listened as Mayor Hoke described a excuse me, as Hoke described a conversation with Marilyn in which she called her husband a Jekyll and a Hyde. The mayor described a conversation that he had with her. That's so, I mean, these people were prominent. I mean, they knew the mayor of the town. She was obviously close enough with the mayor to confide in him that her husband was a Jekyll and a Hyde, if it's true that she did say that. All right. So Susan Hayes, the mistress, flown back to Ohio from her wait, what? From her new home in California. Oh, okay. So she did live in Ohio and now she lives in California. She described the intimate nature of her relationship with Dr. Sam. Police investigator Inspector James MacArthur told the jury that he saw premeditation in the many blows, with Sheppard's philandering providing the motivation. I don't know about that. He told jurors that there was some evidence that Sam wanted a divorce, but Marilyn refused to give him one. On August 17th, just one day after Sheppard has been released from jail on $50,000 bail, the grand jury returned the first-degree homicide indictment against him and he was rearrested. Yikes. Okay. So the trial of Sam Sheppard opened on October 18th, 1954, in the Cleveland courtroom of 70-year-old Judge Edward Blythen. Celebrity journalists flocked to the city for a trial that promised lust. I don't want to say that word. I don't want to say that word on my channel. Mystery and intrigue in abundance. So all of those things this is promised to be. One of those on hand as jury selection began was Dorothy Kilgallen, a syndicated columnist and popular star of the television quiz show What's My Line? In an early report from Cleveland, Kilgallen wrote, "The fact that at this stage it is equally possible for the rational mind to find him innocent or guilty is what may make the Sheppard trial a celebrated cause to rank with the classic puzzle of Lizzie Borden," which is also one of those, did she or didn't she? Shortly after she wrote that sentence, Kilgallen had a surprising and disturbing conversation with Judge Blythen. Called back to the judge's chambers during a break in jury selection, Kilgallen listened in shock as the judge described the case as open and shut. "He's guilty as hell," the judge explained. Kilgallen chose to keep the judge's remarks a secret until the judge lost their life nearly a decade later, knowing that the judge intended the remark to be off the record. Why are you protecting the judge? Why? Tell on that judge. The judge shouldn't have said that to anybody. But no, we protect the people in power for some reason in this country. It makes no sense. Had she reported Blythen's prejudgment, it could very likely have been the basis for a successful motion to remove him from the case. Judges have a lot of power in a case because they rule on what evidence can and can't come in. And if they're biased, they can rule all their motions in favor of the prosecution and not let the defense put on their case, as in what we're seeing in cases like um, Delphi and even Karen Reid. What's going on right now? This is similar of the did she or didn't she? Is she innocent or not? And is she wrongfully convicted? And the whole country is up in arms right now. And there's people that actually believe she's guilty, which I can't understand. Anyways, so she absolutely should have called out her judge's comment. Anyone who does serve on a jury, if a judge, a court clerk, anyone says anything to you that could be biased, if you're serving on a jury, you need to speak up because otherwise this corruption runs rampant and it can be at the judge's level. It can be at the mayor's level. It can be at the DA, the district attorney. It could be anywhere in government. The trial began with a series of defeats for the defense. Most significantly, Judge Blythen denied defense motions to move the trial out of Cleveland and to delay the trial until publicity about the case could die down. The trial would proceed with a jury already familiar with many of the facts and the rumors surrounding the Sheppard homicide. So that's not how you want to go into your trial. Not at all. You want an impartial jury, as impartial as you can be. And even if that means trying to move courthouses or get your judge removed so you can get a fair trial, sometimes it's worth it. worth the fight. Trial would proceed with the jury already familiar with the facts surrounding the case. All but one member of the jury admitting having read about or seen televised reports on the case. The jury's assignment to impartially judge the facts presented in the trial became further complicated when Cleveland papers published each of their photos and names. Real nice. They um they doxed the jurors before doxing was a thing. On November 3rd, the 7 men and 5 women of the jury were bused to the Sheppard home and led on a tour that included the bedroom where the homicide took place, the den with the desk and its evenly pulled out drawers, and the stairs leading to the beach, covered by waves of this windy and overcast day, where Sam claimed to have wrestled with the bushy haired intruder. Sheppard cuffed to a deputy, followed behind the citizens who would judge his fate. When the tour stopped in the room of his son Chip, Sheppard sobbed in the sight of the dresser of a on the dresser of a stuffed teddy bear. That is sad. Especially if you're innocent and you have to go through this and I'm sure, he's missing his son, he's missing his wife, he was expecting, a bigger family, and now plans are totally different. He's in prison and fighting for his life. The next day, jurors listened to opening statements. Prosecutor John Mahan told jurors a reasonable interpretation of the state's evidence will point the finger of guilt at Sam Sheppard. He said that the evidence would show that the defendant and Marilyn were quarreling about the activities of Dr. Sam Sheppard with other women, and that this is the reason that she lost her life. Fred Graymone, outlining the case for the defense, argued that the evidence would not show Sam Sheppard had any motive to end his wife's life. Garmon told jurors that the expecting couple had just enjoyed the best 4 months of their marriage. You can see him in his neck brace, talking to his attorneys. Look at the man with his little cute bow tie. I like bow ties. First prosecution witness was Dr. Lesser Adelson, who over nearly 2 days of the who was on who over nearly 2 days on the stand, succeeding in proving that Marilyn Sheppard indisputably lost her life in a violent death. He displayed gruesome color autopsy slides as jurors and spectators gasped. Sam Sheppard, who saw it but was denied permission to leave the courtroom during the slideshow, stood in a corner of the room with his back to the screen. I'm surprised they even let him do that. On cross-examination, Bill Corrigan tried to establish that Sheppard lost her life from choking on her own BLOOD, but Adelson was firm. Mrs. Sheppard lost her life because she was beaten to her end. She was alive when those blows, or some of them, were struck because hemorrhages found in her brain could not otherwise have developed. So she was alive as many of the blows were taking place. Let that sink in. All right, so patrolman Fred, I said that weird, patrolman, not patrolman, patrolman Fred Drenkin's testimony laid the groundwork for the prosecution's circumstantial case for Sheppard's guilt. Drenkin left little doubt that he found Sheppard's story of a fight on the beach with large, bushy-haired man implausible. He told the jury that he found no signs of a struggle inside the home, no indication of forced entry, and that there were no reports that night of prowlers in the neighborhood. Coroner Sam Gerber, prosecution's star witness, picked up the chase where Drinkin left off. Gerber testified that a stain on Marilyn's pillow appeared to have been caused by the weapon. In perhaps the most damning statement of the entire trial, Gerber told the jury in this stain, I could make out the impression of a surgical instrument. Okay. Defense attorney Corrigan jumped to his feet. Yeah, he's not an expert to determine that. I mean, he's not a spatter analyst and all that. So how would he know? Just because he's the coroner. All right. So defense attorney Corrigan jumped to his feet to demand the remark be stricken, but Judge Blythen denied the motion. Gerber offered two color slides of the pillow stain. On the image of the pillow appeared on the screen in the courtroom. Gerber used a pointer to direct the jury's attention to what appeared to be the outline of a claw-like object. Gerber handed the pillowcase to the jurors who passed it around and, like a Rorschach test, drew their own conclusions about the abstract shape. How were they able to pass around evidence to the jury? Everyone's just touching it, contaminating it more. Although I guess back then you didn't care so much about contamination because you weren't looking for DNA. So, all right. So during cross-examination, Corrigan suggested that the imprint was simply the result of an overlay of the pillow because of its rumpling when the blood was still wet. Gerber, however, persisted in his contention that it was an imprint revealed far more than that. In a second slide, in a second slideshow later in the day, Gerber produced slides showing Sam's spattered watch, uh, uh, what? Blood spattered watch. Okay. He had a splatter on his watch. That which was, Gerber hinted, must have come from Maryland. This was a hard sentence for me. Sorry, guys. Let me try that again. In a second slideshow later in the day, Gerber produced slides showing Sam Sheppard's spattered watch, which Gerber hinted must have come from Marilyn as she was brutally battered by her husband. Detective Robert Schottky followed Gerber to the stand. Schottky identified inconsistencies in Sheppard's story, telling jurors that in one telling he was first hit by the form going upstairs, in another version clubbed in the hallway, and in still another account in the bedroom itself. Schottky also set the stage for Susan Hayes by testifying that in his interrogation of Sheppard, Sam had insisted that he and the laboratory technician were nothing more than good friends. Before the jury could meet Susan Hayes, however, they heard from a parade of investigators. Fingerprint expert Jerome Polking testified that the only fingerprint he recovered from the bedroom came from the headboard of Marilyn's bed and was identical with the left thumb of Sam Sheppard. Sam Sheppard had his fingerprint on his wife's bed. Imagine that. On cross-examination, Corrigan forced Polking to concede that the thumbprint might have been left well before the night of the homicide. Did you ever hear of a man coming into a bedroom and kissing his wife at night? Corrigan asked. Mary Cohen, chief medical technologist in the coroner's office, testified that Marilyn had group O BLOOD and that it tested on Sam's trousers. The BLOOD that was tested on Sam's trousers appeared to be from the same group, but was not entirely conclusive. And we didn't have DNA back then, so you couldn't rule them out or in or what. On December 1st, 24-year-old Susan Hayes, referred to previously in the trial only as Miss X, was led into Judge Blythen's courtroom answering questions in a flat voice. The attractive witness described her intimate relationship with Sam Sheppard. Prosecutor Fred Garmon's last question for the last witness in the prosecution's case in chief hinted at a possible motive for the July 4th homicide. In all this period, you have told us about in which your activities with Sam were going on, you were aware, were you not, that he was a married man? Yes, Hayes answered. With that, John Mahan stood to announce, Your Honor, the state rests. So she could have done it then. Um, she absolutely could have done it. The defense moved for a directive verdict of acquittal, but predictably, Judge Blythen returned the court the next day and announced that he was denying the defense motion. One of the major goals of defense attorney Bill Corrigan was to persuade the jury that his client suffered a serious injury on the night of his homicide and of his wait, what? On the night of the homicide, an injury that it would be difficult, if not impossible, to self-inflict. While it is possible, of course, that Sheppard's injury could have been caused by Marilyn trying to fight off her attacker, Horgan hoped that the jury would believe that the injuries provided strong support for Sam's story about grappling with a bushy-haired intruder. Dr. Stephen Sheppard testified that when he first saw Sam on the morning of July 4th, I thought he was not alive anymore. Touching his neck, Sam Sheppard said there were muscle spasms, involuntary muscle spasms. Sam was blacking out and had to be practically dragged out of his house to the hospital. Corrigan called 4 attending doctors and 3 nurses from Bayview Hospital who confirmed Sam's injuries. Nurse Anna Franz testified that Sam's feet were all shriveled up, as if they had been in the water for a long time. Dr. Gervais Flick, a radiologist, testified that an x-ray of Sam revealed a probable fracture of his second cervical vertebrae. Ow. Dr. Clifford Foster told jurors he found swelling at the base of Sam's skull. Dr. Charles Elkins testified that neck spasms he detected when he examined Sam could not have been faked, but showed a real and significant injury. Except for the parade of witnesses supporting Sam's claim of a serious injury and a few attempts to poke holes in the prosecution's case, the rest of the defense strategy came down to putting Sheppard on the stand and hoping that the jury believed him. Working against him was his tendency towards arrogance and glibness that could undermine efforts to win the jury's sympathy. Sam, wearing a blue suit, white shirt, and a knitted tie, walked to the witness stand on December 9th to begin what would be 3 full days of testimony. Sheppard described his relationship with Marilyn as a fairly happy one. He claimed that the topic of divorce never arose between them. Sure, Sam testified there were some disagreements, as when Marilyn bought a an electric dishwasher with money he thought should go to insurance payments, but never anything out of the ordinary in intensity. Marilyn, he always felt, was in my corner, he said. Sheppard's description of the events of the night roughly tracked his earlier statements. His style, however, was stilted. He visualized rather than saw forms. He was stimulated to go to Marilyn when he heard her cry, found Marilyn in a bad condition. Like, these are just weird ways in which someone would speak. Like, I visualized the individual attacking my wife instead of I saw the guy attacking my wife. Uh, it's just weird to say her cry out to me stimulated me to go see what was happening. And later had a vague sensation of being in the water after wrestling with a form who had evidence of a good-sized head. Is this what a man whose wife's life had been ended would really think and feel? The jury seemed skeptical. I get that, but if he was having um, swelling of the brain and whatever else, if he had issues going on with his neck, I mean, and hitting the head, he might not recollect the situation very well, if at all. I mean, it might just be a blur. Like he could have even blocked it out. Who knows? Prosecutor Mann's cross examination of Sheppard focused heavily on his relationships with other women. Mann got Sheppard to admit that while married to Marilyn, he met a patient in an automobile by a park and kissed her. Was that part of your treatment, doctor? Mann asked sarcastically. Sheppard also admitted to frequent relations with Susan Hayes over a 2 year period. Sheppard said that his brother helped him understand the need to terminate his relationship with Hayes. Steve explained to me that the physical relationship was painful to Marilyn. He emphatically denied telling Hayes at any time that he would seek a divorce from Marilyn. Before allowing Sheppard to return to his seat at the defense table, Mahan asked Sam directly about Marilyn's homicide. Isn't it a fact that you beat your wife to her end? No, sir, Sam answered. And after you ended her life, didn't you run out of the house toward the beach and injure yourself by falling down the beach steps or jumping off the platform of the beach house? Sam replied, That's absolutely untrue, sir, and I think it's very unfair. Closing arguments began on December 15th. Assistant prosecutor Tom Perino ridiculed Sheppard's story. Could this man, in the prime of his life, have been rendered senseless with a single blow? Why were there no signs of struggle in Marilyn's room? How could the assailant have landed 35 blows on Marilyn while Sheppard made his way up to the stairs? Why can't he remember whether he had his t-shirt on? Perino's list of questions went on, and according to many observers, seemed to move the jury. Peter, that's an interesting name. Peter Petersilge, I guess. These names are extremely hard to pronounce, and I just want to let you guys all know that I'm sacrificing all the ridiculous sounding out of words for you because oh, this is so bad. All these names. Petersilge for the defense emphasized the glaring weaknesses of the prosecution's case. 5.5 months since the homicide, and after 9 weeks of trial, the state still doesn't know how the crime was committed, with what weapon, or why. Defense attorney Corrigan concluded by telling the jurors, You have the opportunity to turn back the tide, to tell the people of the nation, of the world, that the constitutional right to a fair trial still exists. While that's motivational and all, Judge Blythen sent the jury to its deliberations on Friday, December 17th. They did not return to his courtroom until the following Tuesday. It took them 18 ballots, but the jury finally had its verdict. Judge Blythen read the verdict form. We find the defendant not guilty of homicide in the first degree, but guilty of homicide in the second degree. Blythen sentenced Sheppard to life with his first eligibility for parole in 10 years. 10 years? What? Okay. He went to prison at 30 and he could potentially get out at 40 for taking his wife's life back then. That's all you got. All right, so moving on to the 1966 trial. Sheppard and F. Lee Bailey leaving courthouse during 1966 trial. For the next 7 years, most of which Sheppard spent at a maximum security prison near Columbus, little went well. In the month after the jury returned its verdict of guilty, Sam's mother committed self deletion and her father lost his battle with cancer. The Ohio courts rejected his appeals. His pretrial nemesis, Cleveland press editor Louis Seltzer, published an autobiography trumpeting his role in bringing Sheppard to justice. That's crap. If you're innocent, some journalist is like, yeah, I'm getting off on your story. that I helped put you away. A few developments, however, offered some promise. Dr. Paul Kirk, a respected California criminalist, after conducting a thorough investigation of the Sheppard home, published a report concluding that the homicide was left handed, probably used a flashlight as a weapon, and most likely was someone who hated the Sheppards. He reported finding BLOOD in the in the bedroom that came, her room, Marilyn's room, that came neither from Sam or from Marilyn. Well, hello. In July 1955, 3 months after Kirk's report was published, a swimmer who lived next to the Sheppard home found a dented flashlight, not a surgical instrument, in shallow water in Lake Erie. Finally, in November 1959, a break for Sheppard came in an unlikely way. Richard Eberling, a man who had washed windows at the Sheppard home around the time of Marilyn's homicide, was picked up for larceny. The search of Eberling's home turned up, among many stolen items, a cocktail ring owned by Marilyn Sheppard. Okay, there's two things that just showed it wasn't him. There's a lot of reasonable doubt, but this didn't come out until after his trial. So that sucks, but good for getting out in the future, but didn't help you, well, defending your case in the first place. The search of Everly's home turned up all those things, including Marilyn's cocktail ring. Taking what must have seemed a stab in the dark, a police officer questioning Everling asked him why his BLOOD had turned up in the Sheppard home in 1954. In fact, no such findings had been made, because cops can lie to you to get you to confess. Eberling shocked the officer by explaining that he cut himself while removing storm windows at the home a couple of days before Marilyn's homicide and had dripped throughout the house. These developments in 1961 were cited by a Chicago reporter, Paul Holmes, in a book about the Sheppard case, arguing for the first time that Sam Sheppard was wrongfully convicted. With, a, with William Corrigan no longer able to um, represent Sam Sheppard, in 1961, he needed a new lawyer. He found he found one in a young, brash attorney named F. Lee Bailey. In April 1963, Bailey filed a petition for habeas corpus in federal court. Bailey contended, among other things, that prejudicial publicity before and during the 1954 trial violated Sheppard's right to the due process of law. The tide that had run against Sheppard for so long seemed to be turning. On a personal level, Sheppard had a new love interest, a buxom blonde named Ariane Tebin Johans. What did I tell you about really difficult words or names in this um, story? And then they throw this at me. Tebin Joannes. Tevin John, I'll call her Tevin Johns. I don't know. Tevin Johns had begun correspondence with Sheppard from her home in Germany. So I'm, of course, butchering it anyway, so it's fine that I'm just gonna say it how I want. Then traveled across the Atlantic to be able to visit him in person, or in prison. Unfortunately, from the standpoint of public relations for Sheppard, Tevin Johns turned out to have an older sister who was married to, of all people, the, and I can't say that word, propagandist chief Joseph Goebbels. More helpful to his prospects for freedom potentially was the success of a new television series, The Fugitive, about an escaped doctor wrongfully convicted of taking his wife's life, who spent each episode trying to track down the real person who did it before the authorities caught him and returned him to prison. The show was widely assumed by the public to be loosely based on the famous Sheppard case, although the show's creator claimed otherwise. So it's not really based on Sam Sheppard's life, but it inspired the TV show and the movie later to come. So in mid July 1964, federal district judge Carl Weinman overturned Sheppard's conviction on federal due process grounds. Weinman used strong language in his opinion, calling the 1954 trial a mockery of justice and quoting many of the editorials that pointedly called for Sheppard's arrest or reported incriminatory evidence that was never introduced in the trial. Almost immediately following his release from prison on a 10,000 bond, Sheppard married Ariane. Sheppard's joy was short-lived, however, because the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, on a 2-to-1 vote, reinstated his conviction, although allowing him to remain free on bail pending his appeal to the United States Supreme Court. In February 1966, the High Court heard oral arguments in the Sheppard case, with F. Lee Bailey arguing for Sheppard and Ohio Attorney General and future United States Attorney William Saxbe arguing for the state. About 3 months later, by a surprising 8-to-1 vote, the Supreme Court reversed the Sixth Circuit and reversed Sheppard's conviction on the grounds that the publicity surrounding the trial prejudiced Sheppard's right to a trial by an impartial jury. It took prosecutors only 2 days after the court's decision to announce that they planned to retry Sheppard for the homicide of his wife. 2 days, huh? The second trial of Sam Sheppard began on October 24, 1966, in the courtroom of Judge Francis Talty. Talty made sure that decorum prevailed and that nothing would be tolerated that would recreate what the Supreme Court called the carnival atmosphere of the first trial. The prosecution case in the retrial differed in significant respects from that presented in 1954. First, prosecutor Leo Spelacey abandoned the surgical instrument as the weapon theory of the first trial, and Sam Gerber was relegated to a more minor role in its case. Still, Gerber took the stand, affording F. Lee Bailey an opportunity on cross-examination to force Gerber to concede that he hunted all over the United States for a surgical instrument that might match the impression found on the pillow, but he couldn't find one. Well, that's good to know. Second, Spelacey chose not to dig too deeply into Sam's personal life, his personal relations, extramarital affairs. Susan Hayes was not asked to come back to Ohio for a second performance. Imagine that, when you don't prejudice the jury by saying, oh, look, he's having an affair, and here she is saying that, oh, yeah, he promised me a divorce. Don't you think all women who are willing to go and date a married man are willing to say, oh, yeah, he promised me a divorce on the stand, even if it's not true? Like, yeah, I think so. Where was I? Instead, the prosecution read Sheppard's July 1954 statement denying his relations with Hayes, leaving jurors to their memories of Sheppard's previous unfaithfulness. The probable motive for the homicide, prosecutors suggested, was an argument over Sam's philandering. The new twist in the prosecution's case came when Spelacey questioned Mary Cohen about the spots found on Sam Sheppard's watch. Cohen testified that a couple of those spots on the rim of the watch were spatter, the which came from her, that could presumably only have been there if Sam were the person who took her life. With Cohen's potentially devastating testimony, the state rested its case. Well, how do you know? Do we know it was her? BLOOD? Because it could have been his. It could have been his own, or the intruders. So I'd like to know if they actually tested that which was on the watch. F. Lee Bailey, fortunately for his client, had a counter to Cohen's powerful testimony. Bailey had a forensic expert, Dr. Paul Kirk, examine color photographs of the watches. On the stand, Bailey asked Kirk about the BLOD found on the watch. Kirk testified for the most part it looked like contact transfer. Kirk conceded that the tadpole-shaped spots along the watch's rim suggested flying BLOD, but said the lack of symmetrical tail left the issue in doubt. Bailey saved his trump card on the watch evidence for a prosecution rebuttal witness, blood expert Roger Masters. Bailey projected large pictures of the watches, then pointed to two small spots on the inside of the band that appeared to resemble the spots on the rim that Mary Cohen had confidently concluded were the result of flying BLOO double OD, not double OOD. That would be too many O's. Bailey asked Masters if he had no. There's a lot of errors in some things that are poorly written, some sentences that are poorly written. So I apologize, and I'm trying to get through this the best I can. So Bailey asked Masters if he had noticed the spots in question. No, I honestly can't say that I did, Masters said, or Marsters, whoever. All right, so Bailey did his homework. He studied the transcript of the 1954 trial and determined not to repeat Corrigan's mistakes. Unlike in the earlier trial, Bailey focused heavily on evidence which he argued cleared his client. Bailey suggested Bailey questioned Dr. Paul Kirk about the pattern of BLOOD around the room, which seemed to radiate out from Marilyn's head. Kirk testified that the pattern suggested that the person who did it was left-handed. Sheppard was right-handed. Kirk also testified that his analysis showed that the largest spot in the bedroom, one found on the closet door near Marilyn's bed, was type O. Like Marilyn's, Sam's was type A. So they're both type A, and there's a type O in their bedroom. But had what? Agglutination properties that distinguished it from Maryland's blood. What is agglutination? I have to know. Sorry, we like learning here. Agglutination definition. Okay. Clumping of particles. A reaction in which particles suspended in a liquid collect into clumps, usually as a response to a specific antibody. So, okay, so agglutination. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that was the definition. Clumping up of substances. All right, so Kirk's conclusion was that it the type O blood obviously did not come from Marilyn or Sam. So there was type O on the closet door, neither one of the homeowners. Bailey also believed it critical to present the jury with at least a plausible alternative suspect. He considered but rejected Everling, believing that a 1959 lie detector test had cleared him of the crime. Instead, Bailey suggested that Esther Hoke, angry with Marilyn for having an affair with her husband, there is evidence that Spencer and Marilyn were close. Spencer, the mayor? I was gonna say, like, well, how did the mayor know that Marilyn was having problems with her husband? Now it makes sense. She was sleeping with them. So it could have been Esther. Could have been Susan Hayes, the the mistress of Sam. Looks like everybody was having extramarital affairs. So there's multiple. It could have been Esther. It could have been, I don't know, Esther or Susan Hayes. So now I suspect Susan too. All right. So, anyways, so Bailey suggested that Esther Hoke, angry with Marilyn for having an affair with her husband, there is evidence that Spencer and Marilyn were close, but not that they had physical relations, had ended her, possibly with the help of Spencer. Maybe. Maybe. Could it have been Spencer's baby if he really were infertile? Bailey called a bread delivery man to the stand to testify that he looked into the kitchen table one morning to see Marilyn drinking coffee with a distinguished older man. Hmm. Bailey was not allowed to show that the delivery man, shown in groups of photos, identified the distinguished older man as Spencer Hoke. In support of his avenging wife theory, Bailey got Esther Hoke to admit that she ignited a coal fire in her fireplace on the morning of the homicide and then introduced national weather reports to show that the temperature that night bottomed out at 69 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning you probably wouldn't need a fire. Bailey hoped that jurors would conclude that Hoke started her fire to burn evidence and her clothes and other evidence of the crime. That makes sense. The most significant difference between the 1954 and 1966 trials, however, was what did not happen in the 1966 trial. Sam Sheppard did not testify. See, no good can come from testifying, I think. The jury will just take your words and twist them. But you can also shoot yourself in the foot by not testifying because a juror might just be like, well, he's guilty because he didn't testify, which they're not supposed to do, but they do it anyways because I don't know why. The average person's not as smart as us. I don't know. All right, so Sam did not testify. Although Bailey understood the risk that jurors might conclude that a defendant unwilling to take the stand must have something to hide, that was a risk the defense attorney was willing to take. Sheppard's cool, pedantic style did not make a good impression with the 1954 trial. In addition, the 1954 jurors found his story about the homicide difficult to swallow, and he didn't want to retest the story with another 12 people. Plus, he was said like he just maybe it's just the way he talks, but the way he was phrasing things that night about, well, I visualized the form and instead of I saw the person. So mm, potentially that could be throwing the jury off as well a lot. All right, so in his closing argument, Bailey told the jurors that the real perpetrator was not in the courtroom. Someone was angry, angry enough to end someone's life. Someone who didn't have the strength in her arm that Sam Sheppard had. Or indeed, he would have crushed that skull like an eggshell. So they're saying Sam Sheppard had the strength to have done more damage, but whoever did it wasn't strong, meaning it was probably a woman because they don't have the upper body strength. Obviously, women can't be serial enders too, serial life enders. Despite his earlier hints about a positive motive, Bailey said the case still left many questions unanswered. Why was that person so angry? What had happened? What had Marilyn done to anger that person? And will we really ever know? Maybe it wasn't, well, maybe it was the affair, or maybe it was because Sam was having an extramarital affair and his mistress wasn't happy. Who knows? It could have been either one of them had motive, not just Sam. And we know now there was type O in the closet or on the closet door, which was not theirs. And it's at this point, I mean, it still could be argued either way, I think. I'm leaning more towards he didn't do it, but I do see how people could say he's still guilty. For most of for most of November 16th, 1966, Sheppard's fate lay in the hands of a deliberating jury. Sorry, words escape me sometimes. The first vote was 8-4 for acquittal, but by the evening the minority had come around. Sam Sheppard was a free man. Sam with Marilyn and Chip, their little boy. Sorry. All right, dog had to lay down. All right, so here's the epilogue. Sam's life had no fairy tale ending. He returned to his surgical practice, but with deteriorated skills and a serious drinking problem, he botched 2 operations and lost both of those patients. He took barbiturates and evidence symptoms of kleptomania. This Ariane Tebbenjans filed for divorce in 1968 after a stormy marriage that included threats and more infidelity from Sam. His relationship with his son was strained. Sheppard's downhill slide eventually led him in August 1969 to make his debut as a professional wrestler using the name, believe it or not, Killer Sheppard. That's probably in poor taste, but it's not for me to judge. On April 6, 1970, at the age of 46, Sam Sheppard collapsed in his kitchen, vomiting blood. Medics called to the scene failed to revive him. A pathologist's report listed the cause of death as liver disease. The death of Sam Sheppard did not mean an end to the continuing mystery surrounding Marilyn Sheppard's homicide. In 1989, renewed attention focused on Richard Eberling, the Sheppard's window washer. Oh, that would be why he said he cut himself. He was their window washer. Maybe it said there earlier, but I missed it if it did. So in 1989, renewed attention focused on Richard Eberling, the Sheppard's window washer, when a jury convicted him of first-degree homicide in connection with an insurance scheme involving an elderly widow that he had befriended. Eberling did little to quell the speculation about him as the possible suspect, telling various interviewers that he knew more than he would say about the Sheppard case and even coming close to admitting his guilt. Eberling, Eberling lost his life in prison in 1998. In 97, Sam Reese, or Chip Sheppard, Sam's son, filed a civil suit against Cuyahoga County on behalf of his father for wrongful imprisonment. Pursuant to a judge's order, both the bodies of Marilyn Sheppard and Sam Sheppard were exhumed for DNA and forensic analysis. In 2000, in an 8-week trial, a civil jury reconsidered the evidence of Sam Sheppard's guilt. Sheppard's legal team argued Eberling was the actual perpetrator. They suggested that the homicide followed an attempted SA, which Marilyn fiercely resisted. Lawyers for the county argued that the 1954 jury got it right, pointing to evidence that they said cleared Eberling. How? Wait, what? In the 2000 trial, a new potential weapon emerged as Cuyahoga County's attorneys presented evidence that a lamp that had rested on a nightstand between the single beds of Marilyn and Sam was the instrument of her demise. A neighbor who repaired the lamp and placed it on the table testified, as did officers who told jurors that no such lamp could be found in the bedroom when they investigated the homicide on July 4th, 1954. Sheppard's lawyers argued that a dented flashlight found in Lake Erie after the crime was the more likely weapon and that spatter evidence undercut key evidence against Sam. The jury ultimately sided with the county. 6 of the 8 jurors said in interviews they were convinced Sam did it. It's the last answer a jury will ever produce, and most likely the one closest to the truth, according to whoever wrote this. But I know that was a long one, but isn't that like such an interesting story? We all are intrigued by these wrongful conviction stories or the ones where it's not necessarily completely clear who did it and if the person that they have on trial is the exact person that did it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Innocence Lost, and I hope that maybe the truth will come out one day, and Sam's son, Chip, can clear his dad's name. And I don't know, it's been 70 years. Do you think it's possible to solve a 70-year-old unsolved crime? Maybe. I'm sure DNA and things like that were not ever really preserved, but potentially new evidence could emerge, I guess. But the more time that goes by, the harder it is to solve a case like that. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below if you think Sam Sheppard ended Marilyn's life and his baby's life, his unborn baby. Let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.
If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.